Welcome everyone to this lecture where we're going to cover how to get API access to the Gemini models. To begin using Python to access the latest Gemini models, we're going to go to ai.google.dev that has information about how to go to MakerSuite to actually create the API key, as well as just information about the Gemini models. I want to quickly point out, however, there are technically two ways to access the Gemini models. You can use an API key in Google AI Studio, which is what we're going to use, but you can also technically use the Vertex AI via Google Cloud. So Google Cloud already has hosted large language models like the PaLM models, and they've had that for a while, meaning it also has access to more advanced IAM capabilities for access management. This basically just stands for Identity and Access Management. We don't actually cover this approach in this course, but if you have some experience with Google Cloud, for instance, you've already set up things like credential, IAM access, and Google Cloud, you can go to this link shown here to understand how to access via Google Cloud. Again, I would really only recommend this approach if you've already used some other Google Cloud Python software development kit, since it does require creating a Google Cloud account, creating an IAM profile, and downloading JSON credentials for that account to have Vertex AI permissions to then access the Gemini large language models. A much simpler way of accessing the models is through an API key. So, Google has an easy-to-use Google AI Studio that's located at makersuite.google.com. We'll actually see that when we go to ai.google.dev, it basically has a link that takes us to the Maker Suite. And then this studio contains both an API key creation center as well as a graphical interface to quickly test prompts. So let's continue on by going to ai.google.dev. Keep in mind that this overarching URL may change in the future. You may just want to confirm with a quick Google search like Google AI Studio or Google Gemini API key to get to the right link. Keep in mind that may take you straight to the Maker Suite, which is actually where you create the API key. Also, make sure to check our notebook for troubleshooting links and other helpful information regarding the API access. So I'll go to ai.google.dev so you can see that before we actually create the API key in the Maker Suite. Okay, so here I am at ai.google.dev. Keep in mind, it's very likely that this page will change in the future, at least what it looks like. But somewhere on this page, you may find the link to Get API Key in Google AI Studio. If you don't see that link, you can just go to the URL yourself. The URL is makersuite.google.com. But if we really want to just quickly check out ai.google.dev, it has information about the 3 Gemini models. Currently, only Gemini Pro is available for general use. Ultra, the larger model, is coming later on. And then Gemini Nano, the small one, meant for things like try offline or on-device use cases, is also coming later on. Has lots of information about how to access via Python, Node.js, Swift, Go, other APIs, and you can scroll down for more information, as well as benchmarks, etc. There's also a nice documentation page that you can check out for full documentation on Gemini references. There's also pricing information. So at the time of this filming, for the free for everyone, you have a 60 queries per minute where price of input is free, price of output is free. However, you do actually allow the input-output data to be used to improve or train the model. So keep that in mind. If you want a pay-as-you-go, that's actually technically not available yet via the Google AI Studio. So keep in mind, don't pass in something like your social security number into the API keys via Google AI Studio. So let's go ahead and get that API key and test it out. Now this may, by default, keep you on the prompt page. This is where you actually test out prompts, and you can change out the model. Right now there's just Pro and Pro Vision. You can also play around with temperature. We're going to learn how to do all of this with Python, but what's really cool is if you just play around with the prompts here, what you can do is click on Get the Code up here in the right-hand corner to quickly get the code in whatever language you're working with. But in order to do this and learn Python on our own, within our own development environment, what I want to show you is how to get an API key. So you're going to want to go to over here where it says Get an API Key on the left. I will click on that. It's going to ask you if you want to save those changes. I don't care. And then we have the API keys. So something to keep in mind is currently Google AI Studio limits API keys to only one active project. If you've never used anything on Google Cloud, it basically is just going to create a project for you upon creating the API key. So you should be able to, if you're just brand new to this and haven't really used Google Cloud, you should be able to click Create API Key in New Project, click on that, and then it will create the API key. If you're getting an error, such as the one down here, that says, I'll get that error message again, caller does not have permission, That basically means that Google AI Studio already created a project for you and you just need to select that project. So if you've deleted a historical API key and you need a new one and you're getting that error of, hey, the caller doesn't have permission, it just means you need to click over here on the second option, create API key in existing project, and then you can search for the Google Cloud projects, but you should see that it created one for you called Generative Language Client. You could see that I had other projects there because I use Google Cloud for other projects, but it should, after you've created an API key once, have already created that existing project for you. So you're going to use the second option there. I'll go ahead and create that new API key. It's going to generate it. And then right now, you'll have the API key. Remember, you don't want to share these API keys, so that's why I have mine blurred out right now. I will go ahead and copy this API key. It should be a string of letters and numbers, and then we're going to write that down somewhere on our computer. So I'm going to go ahead again and copy this, and I'm going to head over now to my Python development environment, which is Jupyter. All right, so here I am at Jupyter. As a quick note, in the zip file from the very start of the course, we have a folder called API Access Setup that has a notebook called 00 API Setup that has lots of information about how to install the Python SDK, how to get the API key that we just discussed, as well as some troubleshooting notes that gives you really useful links to other things we talked about, as well as more in-depth information about different ways of setting your API key, as also saving it, doing something like an environment variable. That way it's not exposed. Now, we're going to just do kind of a simpler version of this where we just set it as an environment variable using the OS. But technically speaking, in the Jupyter Notebook, that's going to get reset every time depending on how you actually installed Jupyter. So we have full details here on how to save your API keys in a more secure manner. But let's go ahead and start a new notebook and just show you how to use the API key that you just downloaded from MakerSuite. So first things first, you have to actually install the generative AI library or package from Google. So to do that, it's just going to be a pip install, and you can run that inside your notebook with an exclamation mark, pip install Google-generative AI. You can also do this at your command line. Again, however you like to pip install libraries, you're going to do that, but the library we need to install is Google-generative AI. I already have it installed, so I'm good to go. You sometimes need to restart your kernel. You can go to kernel, restart kernel, if you just installed a new library inside of a Jupyter notebook. So let's confirm that the installation worked by importing it. We're going to say import google.generative AI as gen AI. And remember, you have your API key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a variable called API key is equal to, and then I'll pass in my API key there. I'm going to go ahead and just quickly paste my API key in. You'll see a jump because I don't want to share my API key. All right, so I pasted in my API key as a string, and then I ran this line. Of course, your API key is going to be different. And now I have API key. And if I check the length of my API key, it's some 39 long digits and letters. So how do I actually make sure that this is working with Google Generative AI Library? Well, of course, later on, we're actually going to generate chats and that sort of thing. But what I can do is call gen AI, and I'm going to configure it to connect via my API key. So we'll say API key is equal to API key. And if you're able to run that line without any errors, you should then be able to list all the models available. So then we can say here, for model in gen AI dot list underscore models, and then we'll say print the model name. Go ahead and run that, and you should see a bunch of models available. There are the older models available, like Chat Bison and Text Bison, and the three that we're going to be working with here are the Gemini Pro model, Gemini Pro Vision, which can take in images, and then later on, to show you how to actually perform retrieval augmented generation, we'll use the embedding model. But these are the three models we're going to be working with. As long as you see these three, then you're good to go. And we know that by listing these models, we successfully connected this API key. That's it for API key access. Again, I have a lot more detail in the API setup. If you want to learn how to set this up as an environment variable, you can do that at the command line or in the notebook or in your Python code, however you prefer. But the simplest way to do it is just set it up as a string. You can always delete that line and then just connect it via the configure call. If you got the list of model names, you're good to go, and let's start generating some text. I'll see you at the next section of the course.